right, what's going on, everybody? Appreciate you tuning in to our channel. This is North Carolina Living, where we're living it up in Western North Carolina. We love living in the mountains here. The climate is so beautiful, beautiful mountain air every day. It's something that we appreciate and feel blessed to be in this area of the country. Today, I wanted to do something a little bit different and talk a little bit about planting tips with Japanese maples. Now, I've got a beautiful specimen size Acer japonicum fairy lights, and this is a ball and burlap. So I'm excited to go over a lot of planting techniques and tips for Japanese maples. I have planted literally thousands of these trees with some great successes and a few failures along the way. I always say in gardening, you're going to have a lot of failures, and those failures give you experience and knowledge and understanding of maybe what you did wrong or how you can fix it when you go into the future planting. And so I always like to try to give people reassurance that just because you plant a Japanese maple and for whatever reason you're like, man, it died, I just don't have a green thumb, I'm not going to keep planting Japanese maples because they die. Well, if you do it properly, if you select the right cultivar, if you do all of the right planting techniques that I'm going to try to cover today, then you're going to set yourself up for better success in your gardening experience, especially with Japanese maples. That's one of the things that I've done a lot of over the years, and I want to share my experience and knowledge with you guys. I'm going to try to cover a lot of information in this video today because I think one of the biggest reasons why most people have failures in their attempt to growing Japanese maples, it really starts in the beginning. So if you get these things right, then you're setting yourself up for more success. So let's start with number one is, in my opinion, picking the right cultivar for your space in your garden and also for your zone and your climate where you live. I think those two things really start the whole process of beginning the success that you have with planting Japanese maples and allowing them to thrive and to grow and look so amazing and beautiful as they should. Just to give you an example here, we're in Zone 7B in Western North Carolina. We're in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We have a very mild climate here. It doesn't get too hot and it doesn't get too cold. We do have every season, though. That where we live in Hendersonville is considered the Four Seasons city because we have a very defined winter, spring, summer, and fall. So those are very important steps to go through and think about, where you live and how those things impact the plants in your garden. I already have a hole here started because I had something else in this location that I had to move in order to fit this cultivar because I think this is a better spot for the Acer japonicum fairy lights. But here's the next part, I think, in planting Japanese maples that a lot of people struggle with, and maybe it's just lack of information out there. So I want to try to provide that information to y'all watching. That way you can, again, be set up for more success when you're planting Japanese maples. Probably one of the number one things that people get wrong with planting Japanese maples is planting them too deeply in the hole. And so that's important to not bury that trunk too deeply into the ground and then start to bury the trunk into the soil. That's a very common mistake, and those kind of conditions for the tree leads to a lot of diseases. Also, one of the things about this particular tree that I have today, it is a ball and burlap tree. It's not in a nursery pot. I have seen in so many different scenarios that people have been told and advised that you don't have to take it out of the burlap sack, that you can just plant it straight into the ground and it will be fine. The roots will grow through the bag and everything is fine. Now, we can debate that topic, but in my opinion and my experience, I can tell you that that is not the best approach. The bag, even though it is a biodegradable thing, it takes a long time for that bag to break down. And a lot of times those ball and burlaps will have a wire cage that's holding the root ball together. So that's one thing to really pay attention to, because that can strangle the root system of the tree and not allow those roots to spread out and establish it. This one here, so far, I have not opened up this yet, but it looks like it's just roped that is holding it together. So we're going to dive in and show you a little bit more about the ball and burlap with a Japanese maple. Let's get in here and take a look at this. This is very typical of a ball and burlap that you'll find. A lot of nurseries carry this in their inventory. Rather than it being grown in a container, these are usually field grown. They dig them up and they put them in the burlap sacks to sell them. So let's open this thing up and see what we have going on here. And one of the things I'll point out as we're working on getting this thing loosened up is one of the major reasons why you don't want to plant a tree in the burlap sack is this is very tightly bound up against this trunk right here. As you can see, this is going to be an issue going forward if you were to not remove this particular bag. It's going to create a strangle point here on the trunk, which could eventually, especially with the rope or wire bound together there, those things can begin to bind on that trunk and create damage and cut into the actual trunk of the tree. But this is going to be easy to remove the strings around this to allow me to begin the planting process. And I think this is something that a lot more people need to understand when planting a Japanese maple, is that there is some preparation for it that you need to take. And with a burlap sack, especially, in my opinion and experience, it's best to remove the burlap sack, remove the string or wire. All right, we've got all the rope cut off from the root ball and the bag has been removed. So this next part is very important, and I'm trying to cover all the bases of properly planting a Japanese maple to give you the best success. Some of the things that I have done over the years and I have found that gives me a greater, healthier plant, a more beautiful and vibrant plant that thrives instead of struggling after you plant it. Because if you do all the wrong things planting it, then you're going to have a tree that is having a lot of disease issues and a lot of things that it may not be able to get some growth that you're expecting it to get. A lot of variables start coming into play when it's not planted correctly. One of the things I spoke about earlier is to make sure that you're not planting the Japanese maples too deeply in the ground. One of the ways to do that is to make sure you're not digging your hole too deep. The other part to that everybody seems to forget is that a lot of times in the nursery pot, or in this case in a ball and burlap, the tree is already planted too deeply within the soil that it's contained in at the moment. And as I put this into this hole, I began to uncover going up here on the trunk. And what I found is that this Acer japonicum fairy lights was planted probably about 3 to 4 inches into the soil that was in the ball and burlap. So the trunk was about 4 inches underneath the soil level, which is something you really want to pay attention to, because that's going to create a lot of issues for your Japanese maples. So I do have this tree in leaf right now. We're in early spring, so I can't disturb the root system too much, but don't be afraid to remove excess soil around the trunk even when you're planting in spring. This is not going to affect the plant at all. You're doing it a huge favor by doing this. so many different times in my experience of in years of gardening, before I knew this, I would plant the tree at the level of the nursery pot or the ball and burlap, and I'd start having issues with the tree, and I'd be wondering, well, I thought I did all of this correctly. And the underlying issue was that even in the nursery pot or the burlap sack, this tree was planted too deeply already. So, and then when I planted it in my own soil, I just kind of compounded that issue. And it's important to remember that. One of those great tips for all gardeners to remember, with Japanese maples especially, is to make sure that you have that root flare at the trunk where the root system and the trunk come together. Make sure that that's exposed at ground level and not buried into the soil. All right, everybody, I hope you're enjoying this video. I know I can get long-winded on some of these particular planting techniques and information, but I wanted to try to be very thorough today in this video. This is a really, really amazing cultivar, so you want to get something like this right. You want to give it the best opportunity to thrive in your garden and create a beautiful specimen out here. So what I have here is Acer japonicum fairy lights. I've mentioned that numerous times so far, but I wanted to hit that again because I want to talk about the characteristics of this tree. This size that it already is very much a very far along specimen in size. This is a very slow grower, stays very small. I've seen some in this size that have been in the ground for 15 years. So this is definitely one that is of good size and of a mature age. So I want to get this location right. I want to get the planting technique right because there's a lot of time and money invested in this particular cultivar. Now, the other part to that is depending on where you're planting it in your garden, is to think about the face of the tree, what you want to see when you look at your plant, and depending on where you want to view it from, where your favorite viewing area is, or maybe it's a walkway, or it's you know, in a gazebo that you would like to sit in and where you would look out and see your tree. There typically, with all Japanese maples I've found, is that there is a face or a side to the tree that looks the most appealing. And I think that's an important factor to think about when you're planting it, because once you got it in the ground, you don't want to have to, oh man, that doesn't look right, I'm going to have to dig it back up, turn it, put it back in, all of those things. You want to try to get that right the first time so you're not disturbing the tree too much when you're planting it. So right now, I've kind of got this just set into the hole. I have not determined which way would look best for this, but it does kind of appear that on this backside, I've got a little bit less growth and there's a little bit of a empty space here. It's not as balanced on this one side. Whereas on this side here, I've got lower branches and a more fuller look to that this side on this side right here. So I want to try to turn this plant. I'm going to try to turn it towards you, because from where you're at is where I would typically be looking at this plant in my garden. So I'm going to do a little turn here and show you guys what I'm talking about, and see if you can see that I've got a better face of this tree on this side. So here it goes. All right, so hopefully this comes across on camera. I think I have found the beautiful face of this Acer japonicum fairy lights. I have turned this where the backside now is where the lower branches were lacking, and it was lacking in balance on this backside. And the backside is up against the back area of the garden where I've got my privacy fence. So it's not as noticeable to see that irregular growth on this side. Now the front side gives you a beautiful balance of structure and shape. You've got the lower branching filling out the lower areas, and then some nice branching that's going to continue to fill out the top. I'm really excited about this cultivar. The shape on this thing is absolutely amazing, and I hope that you guys have been enjoying this video today. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, now that I have it in place, we're going to get in and talk a little bit more about ground level, making sure that you're at the right level, and then backfilling it up, and then we'll wrap this video up. All right, so now that we have it in place, we have it turned where the face is pointing in the direction that we want to view the tree from. The last step is to reestablish and make sure that it's at the correct planting level. Now that we have the trunk exposed, now remember, I told you earlier that this trunk was planted about this deep into the soil that was in the ball and burlap. A good 4 inches too deeply into the soil. So if I would have just planted that at the soil level that came with the burlap, I would have been planting it too deep already. So we've exposed the trunk, we've got it in position, and now as you can see here, I'll try to remove, and you see the grass here in my native soil in my garden, and the trunk now at the flare is just right at that level and slightly above where my ground level is. And that is exactly what you want when it comes to planting Japanese maples. It's going to give you the best success and the healthiest trees where they can thrive and become beautiful specimens in your garden. Wow, I'll tell you what, that was a lot of fun. There is almost nothing I love more than planting Japanese maples. It's one of my favorite things. There's something very satisfying about it for me personally. Getting my hands in the soil, I've got dirty hands right now. Getting it down on my knees, getting my hands in the soil, connecting with the earth, connecting with the plant, and just being a part of this whole experience. I know a lot of you can relate to that, as we've planted a lot of Japanese maples and different plants in our garden. It's an exciting time to be out here. Spring is here and there's so much going on. It's kind of hard to contain myself. I come out here every day and I'm like, what do I record today? There's so many. I don't know where to begin. I don't know if I can get to all of them before spring's over, but I try. But today I had to get out here and show you something different, a little bit different style of video. I hope you've been enjoying it. We have so many plants here in the garden. It's really cool to go kind of step by step through my process of how I plant Japanese maples and creating and designing in my garden. So I wanted to just talk a little bit real quick about the final step to this process. Now that you've got it in the ground, you've got it planted at the proper level, in the right location, sited with the face for everybody to view. Once you have it mulched, then the very last and final step is to water it in. It's been transplanted, you've disturbed the root system a little bit, it's been in a ball and burlap sack for a while, so it needs a good, healthy drink. So you want to soak this in, give it all of that ground a chance to settle and to kind of push out any air gaps. And so now this is ready to be the most beautiful tree out here in my garden. I don't know, maybe that one over there is better, maybe this, they're all good. So but this one's going to hold a special place in my heart because this is one of the first trees that I've planted this spring out here in my garden. So I'll remember this day and this video where I got a chance to visit with you guys about planting tips and the proper way to plant Japanese maples.